Hello everyone, I'm making some videos to help you work your way through our first practice set, which is the foundational review. Since you were placed in this class or have finished foundational math, I expect that this is content that you probably know for the most part, but some of the questions you might still find tricky depending on how much experience you've had with this stuff. Remember, everyone's experience will be different. So we'll begin at the beginning and we'll start to take a look at integers. The first thing we'll do is get a bit of confusion or a common place for a mistake out of the way. We know the rule that two negatives make a positive, but let's first disprove that rule, looking at -3 subtract 5. So this is just an addition/subtraction question. And what we're looking at here is two negative numbers. So if you were to say that the result is +8, well, something's gone wrong because that doesn't match reality. So it's important to remember that when you are combining with addition or subtraction, when you're combining integers like -3 subtract 5, think more of it like a number line that you're moving up and down, right? So if you're already below 0 at -3, and you're subtracting 5 or going down by 5 more, you're getting further into the negatives. You're not going into the positives, right? So -3 subtract 5, if we slide along the number line from -3 and go down by 5 more, we're at -8. I find it really helpful to think about this in terms of degrees on a thermometer. If I'm at -3 and the temperature goes down by 5, the temperature is now -8. The next example is a little different. We've got negative of -1, and we can think about this a bunch of different ways. And the first way that I might want to think about that is that I'm subtracting -1. Well, if we think of this in terms of debt, I'm removing debt, right? If you remove debt, then that's actually something positive is what I'm trying to draw right there. Another way to think about this is to, well, this is one of the reasons that people don't really like math a lot sometimes, because you could say that there's an invisible 1 sitting there in front of the -1 that's in a bracket. And when two operations are sitting there side by side, we think of them as multiplication. So we think this, we could potentially think of this as -1 times -1 for a value of +1. And I guess another way still to think about that is to say that I want the opposite of -1. And the opposite of -1 you might think of as +1, right? Or you're negating -1, so it changes sign and becomes positive. One way or another, I like to simplify things and just say when you have a double sign like this, that's not the technical math name for it, but it works for me. When you have a double sign like this, it follows the multiplication rules, because technically you could think of this as negative times -1, right? -1 times -1. And so if it's a multiplication, we can think of the rule that two negatives make a positive, right? And if it was a negative and a positive, it would make a negative. So it would follow the standard rules that we know about integers that are, I'll recap that quickly, two negatives would lead to a positive. Two positives lead to a positive. So in other words, when the signs are the same, the result is positive. If it's a positive times a negative, then its result is negative, or vice versa, negative times a positive. When the signs are different, it becomes negative. And the last bit we'll look at with these double signs is when we're combining them with another number. Right here we have -5 subtract -8. So it doesn't matter, you could use any of the ways we thought about it before. You're removing debt, right? So that really means that you're adding. Or you could think of it as a multiplication where two negatives make a positive. Really, it's just an order of operations thing. We want to take two bits of information and turn them into one. That's essentially what BEDMAS does if you follow it step by step. So -5, negative makes positive, and 8. So if we're at 5 below and we go up by 8, thinking in terms of temperature, the result will be that we are 3 degrees above, or positive 3. In terms of multiplication and division, well, this is where we continue to follow the 2 negatives make a positive rule, or that if the signs are different, the result is negative. We have one slight complexity here in this type of question. What happens when you have 3 different numbers that you're multiplying? So essentially, this could be an order of operations question, and when operations are of equal power, we should be working from left to right. So what we can do is take care of the first 2 numbers and then multiply by the last number. So we'll treat this in 2 different steps. Of course, this you could do this in 1 step if you know how to do it. So negative 3 times negative 4, 2 negatives make a positive. The result is 12, and that's going to be multiplied by negative 2. So there's step 1. We combined 2 numbers into 1. That one number being positive 12, and now we have 12 times negative 2, which is, well, positive times negative, negative 24 is the result of that. And again, what did we do? Combine 2 numbers into 1. That's how order of operations works. The result, minus 24. And to finish up this video on integers, which is the first part of the practice set, let's take a look at these 2 order of operations questions. Number 9, let's just take a look at what's going on here. People often don't like fractions, so let's just think of a fraction as a division question that has never been done yet, meaning that, well, you could do the division and you could get a number out of it. Another thing I want you to think of here is that when you have, and this will apply to many areas of the course and a lot of questions that we're going to do, when you have multiple things happening in the numerator, well, there's only one thing happening there, or the denominator down here, what's not often talked about is, well, that there's an implied set of brackets. In other words, if there are multiple things happening in the numerator or denominator, we need to treat those, well, I guess we need to take care of them first before we do the rest of the question. So you should, from left to right, do 4 subtract 1, add 3 before you continue with the rest of the question. And this will apply to anything in a fraction that has multiple parts. Okay, so remember that those invisible brackets are there. And here there's nothing really all that special happening. We should start inside our brackets because that's the first part of bedmass, and bedmass is what matches reality. We talked about that a lot in class. The next part of this looks like 1, 2, 3 additions or subtractions that are happening, but don't forget this double sign, I guess you can think of technically as a multiplication, so it should be taken care of first. Once it's taken care of, you can add and subtract the bracket, and then the next part would be to multiply it.